Old mother kicked out of house, neighbors outraged. The rain had just stopped when someone noticed the old woman sitting by the gate. She wasn't begging. She wasn't even crying. She just sat there motionless, as if the world had given up on her, and now she was quietly doing the same. Her name was Mrs. Lan, 78 years old. Wrinkled skin, silver hair tucked into a bun, clothes soaked from the sudden storm. Next to her, a cheap plastic bag held what remained of her life: a thin blanket, a medicine box, and a few old photos wrapped in cloth. It was her son Tuan's house. Everyone in Dong Hoa Street knew it. Big steel gates, 2 floors, shiny white tiles that sparkled even under the dull sky. A successful house. But the woman at the gate, the woman who birthed him, had no place inside. "She's been sitting there for 2 hours, said Bonhomme, the neighbor. "They won't even open the door. She's his mother, for God's sake." No one dared to knock. Not yet. Dong Hoa had its share of gossip, but no one thought it would come to this. An old mother, driven out of her home. Mrs. Lan didn't speak much. When someone brought her a cup of tea, she thanked them softly. When offered a coat, she declined with a gentle shake of the head. Only when Bonhomme sat beside her did she whisper. "Lone said I was a burden, that I'm always sick, always in the way." Lone Tuan's wife, 39, sharp-tongued, sharp-dressed. The kind of woman who counted electricity bills down to the last dong and never missed a parent-teacher meeting, but couldn't find a minute to speak kindly to her mother-in-law. "Tuan, didn't even look at me," Lan added, her voice cracking for the first time. He just turned away. From inside the house, the light was still on. Curtains drawn. No one came out. The neighbors watched, and they remembered. They remembered when Lan used to wake up at 4 a.m. to cook zoi for her son before school. When she sold vegetables at the wet market so Tuan could finish college in the city. When she pawned her wedding bangles to help him open his first auto repair shop. And now, she was left outside like an unwanted dog. That night, something shifted in the air. It wasn't just sympathy. It was anger. 2 days earlier. "Why don't you go back to the village?" Lone had asked coldly, setting down her chopsticks. Mrs. Lan looked up from her bowl. Her hands trembled slightly, but she tried to smile. "I don't know anyone there anymore. And the house is gone, remember? We sold it to pay for Bin's surgery." Lone rolled her eyes. "We're not running a care home, hear me? You're here every day, always needing something. We can't even rest in our own house." Tuan said nothing. He stared at the rice on his plate like it held all the answers he didn't want to give. Lan looked at him, her son. The boy she had carried on her back through floods, who cried when he scraped his knee, who used to kiss her cheek before leaving for school. He didn't meet her eyes. That silence was the answer. That night, her bag was packed. Back to the present. It was nearly 9 p.m. when the shouting began. "Tuan, mo qua someone yelled. "You can't just leave her out here. Is this how you treat your own mother?" Bonhomme, Ong Quang, and even young Hui from next door stood at the gate, their faces flushed with rage. Inside, the lights flickered. A curtain moved, but no one opened the door. "Coward," someone muttered. "We should call the commune leader," said another. "She has rights. You can't evict your parent like that. It's illegal." But Lan shook her head. "No police," she whispered. "Please, don't make it worse for them." She still wanted to protect them, even now. That broke Bonhomme's heart more than anything. The next morning, a local journalist, tipped off by someone in the crowd, showed up with a camera and questions. "This is not uncommon," he said quietly to Bonhomme. "But it's rare for neighbors to care this much." He snapped a photo of Lan under the morning sun, wrapped in a donated blanket, her eyes half closed, lips moving in silent prayer. The headline hit Facebook by noon. "Mother kicked out in the rain while son hides inside." It spread like wildfire. Shares, comments, fury, and still silence from the house. Inside that silence, guilt bloomed like mold. Tuan sat in the living room, phone in hand, reading the comments. "Ungrateful bastard. Your mother gave you everything. If you don't want her, I'll take her in." He turned off the screen. Lone paced nearby. "This is your fault. You should have told her to leave quietly." Tuan didn't respond, because he remembered something else. He remembered the winter he was 9, when he had pneumonia. They had no money, no heater, barely enough food. His mother held him every night, her body wrapped around his like a second blanket. She hummed old lullabies. She never slept. He owed her more than he could ever repay. That night, he opened the gate. Lan was asleep on the mat, arms wrapped around her blanket like a child. "Me," he said softly. "Come inside." Her eyes opened. She blinked at him. She looked smaller than he remembered. "I'm sorry," he said. And for once, he meant it. But it was too late. That night, after he whispered, "Come inside," she didn't move. Mrs. Lan simply looked at him, long and deep, as if studying a painting she used to love but could no longer recognize. Tuan felt the weight of that gaze pressing into his chest. "Come inside," he repeated, his voice tighter now. But she only shook her head gently. "I don't want to be somewhere I'm not wanted," she said, not with bitterness, not with anger, but with something far worse. Peace. A kind of quiet surrender. Act 2. The Echo of Conscience. Over the next few days, things changed, but not how Tuan imagined they would. The video had gone viral. Comments flooded in from around the country. News stations picked up the story. People wanted to know, what kind of man leaves his mother outside in the rain? A Buddhist monk from Hue commented, "A home without compassion is just walls. A sun without gratitude is just noise in the wind." Even strangers from abroad sent messages to the neighborhood group chat, offering to take Mrs. Lan in, to send her blankets, food, even plane tickets if she had family elsewhere. But Lan didn't want a plane, or strangers, or even a comfortable bed. She just wanted silence. And, maybe, to be remembered with kindness before she died. Meanwhile, inside the house, guilt metastasized. Lone doubled down. She became sharper, colder. "They don't know what she's like behind closed doors," she snapped. "She complains about her knees, but then she rearranges the garden. She says she's sick, but eats 2 bowls of rice. They think she's some kind of saint." Tuan said nothing. Because what could he say? Each time he tried to speak, he heard again his mother's soft voice outside the gate. "He didn't even look at me." He couldn't shake that sentence. Then, on the 7th day, something happened that no one expected. She vanished. Gone. The mat, the bag, the blanket, everything gone. Just a note tucked under the gate. "Don't look for me. I don't want to make more trouble. Please forgive me for being a burden. Take care of each other." Me. The whole neighborhood was thrown into panic. "She's old and weak. Where could she go?" Bonam shouted, organizing a search party. "She didn't even have money for a bus," Ong Kwong muttered, shaking his head. Tuan ran. For the first time in years, he ran. He checked the park where she used to sit with Ben, the hospital where she once worked as a janitor, even the tiny temple down the road where she burned incense every New Year. Nothing. 3 days passed. Then a phone call came. A monk from a pagoda 70 kilometers away had found her at dawn, asleep by their front gate. She'd walked barefoot, refusing rides, eating almost nothing. When asked why, she had only said, "I was looking for quiet." They gave her tea, shelter, and a place to rest. When Tuan arrived, she was sweeping the courtyard, slowly, like she had all the time in the world. "Me," he called. She didn't turn. Not right away. Then, as if remembering a sound from childhood, she looked over her shoulder. "You came." "I came to take you home." She stared at him a long moment. "Home?" she asked. "Where is that?" He didn't know how to answer. Back at Dong Hoa Street, the air was different. Neighbors whispered in softer tones now. Children glanced at Tuan with mixed curiosity and pity. Lone stayed inside, curtains drawn, avoiding eye contact even with herself in the mirror. It wasn't just shame. It was fear. Fear that she had been exposed for who she really was, and not just to strangers, but to the woman she used to call me. 1 week later, a charity from Saigon reached out. They wanted to feature Mrs. Lan in a short documentary about elder abandonment in Vietnam. They called her a symbol of silent sacrifice. She declined. "I'm no symbol," she told the young producer. "I'm just a mother who overstayed her welcome." The words hit like bricks. The boy packed his camera and left without recording a single frame. Then one day, Ben Tuan's 10-year-old son asked a question at dinner. "Ba, is Ba Noi coming back?" Tuan and Lone froze. "She doesn't want to come back," Lone said quickly. But Tuan looked into his son's eyes and saw what he hadn't seen in years, a chance. He stood up. "Do you want to visit her?" Ben nodded. Lone protested. "We can't encourage this." She left. "She embarrassed us." But Tuan was already packing a bag. For the first time in their marriage, he didn't ask for permission. At the pagoda, Ben ran into his grandmother's arms. "Ba Noi, why don't you live with us anymore?" Lan knelt slowly, cupped his face in her hands, and smiled. Because sometimes, love is quiet. It doesn't need to be in the same house. Ben looked confused, but he hugged her tightly anyway. Tuan watched, and something shifted. Not in the air, but inside him. That night, Lan told him a story. When you were 5, we were so poor I had to beg the noodle lady to give us scraps. One night, I came home with half a bowl. I told you I already ate. But I was lying. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. Tuan clenched his fists. I didn't tell you this to make you feel guilty, she continued. I told you because that's what love does. It gives, even when it's empty. Back home, Tuan made a decision. He cleaned out the guest room. Not the dusty one near the back, but the sunlit one with windows facing the garden. He repaired the broken shelf, hung a photo of his parents on the wall, and told Ben they were going to invite Noi home again. When he told Lone, she snapped. You're letting them win. The neighbors, the internet, they don't know our life. This isn't about them, Tuan said calmly. This is about me. About who I am. About who I want our son to learn to be. Lone stared at him. And what about me? He paused. Maybe it's time you decide what kind of woman you want to be. 2 days later, Mrs. Lan returned. She didn't say much, just smiled, bowed to the neighbors, and stepped back into the house she once called home. She didn't expect comfort. Only a roof. Only silence. But what she got surprised her. Tuan had prepared a small altar in her room. A bowl of fresh fruit. Incense. A handwritten note. You matter. She cried. Quietly, so no one would hear. Just as she always had. But healing is not immediate. Lone still avoided eye contact. She spent more time outside than in. The house felt like a field of landmines. Then one night, Ben got sick. High fever. Shaking. Hospital. Lan was the first to react. She packed the bag. She called the cab. She held his hand the whole night, while Tuan paced the hallway. Lone sat outside, alone. Lan didn't judge her. Didn't lecture. She just let her be. And when the doctor finally said he's out of danger, Lan was the one who brought Lone a cup of tea. I know you love him, she said simply. That's enough for now. Lone took the tea. Her hands trembled. She didn't say thank you. But her silence was softer this time. Weeks passed. Then months. The house that once echoed with cold silences began to hum again. It wasn't loud. There were no grand reunions, no declarations of forgiveness. But in the quiet, something like healing began. Lan watered the plants every morning. Ben helped her. She taught him how to snip the yellow leaves, how to feel the soil and know when to water, how to thank the tree before plucking a flower. Lone watched them through the window. Sometimes she joined. Not often, but sometimes. Tuan took on more housework. He insisted on it. It's not me's job anymore, he said. She's done enough. Lan protested, of course. I'm not a guest. But you're not a servant either, Tuan replied, smiling. That smile took her by surprise. It had been so long since she'd seen it not on his face, but on his soul. One Sunday, during lunch, something broke through the silence. Me, Lone said quietly. I'm sorry. Everyone stopped eating. Even the fan slowed down, it seemed. I didn't understand, she continued, looking down at her rice. I didn't know how much you'd given up. I was afraid that if I let you stay, I'd lose something. My space. My control. Lan looked at her. Then she reached over and gently placed her hand on Lone's. You didn't lose anything, she said softly. You gained family. Lone broke down crying. Not the loud kind, but the kind that leaks through clenched teeth that had waited too long to be seen. They didn't hug. They didn't make a scene. But in that moment, something thawed. And so life went on. Lan joined a group at the local temple that helped abandoned elderly people find community. She cooked for them on weekends, shared stories, held hands of strangers who had no family left. People called her Ba Lan Tu Bai, kind Grandma Lan. One of the neighbors, a young man named Kwa, offered to help make a documentary after all, but this time on her terms. Not a tragedy piece, but a story of strength and quiet survival. She agreed, on one condition. The documentary aired 6 months later. It featured her walking through the pagoda courtyard, teaching young volunteers how to rap Bon Tet, her voice calm, her hands sure. When asked what message she wanted to leave behind, she said, Don't wait until your mother is gone to love her. Don't let fear speak louder than kindness. It went viral again. But this time, no shame. Only pride. Back at home, something beautiful bloomed. Not just forgiveness, but a new kind of love. Ben wrote an essay at school titled The Strongest Woman I Know. He didn't write about a celebrity or a superhero. He wrote about his grandmother, about how she taught him to sweep the yard, how she knew how to make ginger tea when he had a sore throat, how she never shouted even when people heard her. When the teacher read it aloud in class, some of the children cried. One rainy evening, nearly a year after that night at the gate, something unexpected happened. Tuan took his mother out for coffee. A small, quiet cafe she used to pass by every day, but never entered because, as she once said, coffee shops aren't for old women who smell like tiger balm. They sat in a corner. 2 cups of warm, sweetened safi suade between them. Tuan looked at her, truly looked. You saved me, you know, he said. She tilted her head. That day I came to the pagoda, it wasn't just about guilt. It was about coming home to myself. She smiled. That's what mothers do. We wait. Even when you forget where to return to, we keep the door open. And finally, the street forgave. Neighbors no longer whispered behind their backs. They came for tea, for advice, for help. People brought their own mothers to visit Lan, to thank her, to tell her that her story reminded them to be better sons, better daughters. She became not just a mother, but everyone's mother. And in a world that often throws away the old, she became proof that wisdom, softness, and endurance are not weaknesses but pillars that hold entire generations upright. On her 80th birthday, the family gathered in the courtyard. No balloons, no loud music, just a table of home-cooked food, stories, and laughter. Lone presented her with a photo album, one that included new memories. Ben's school plays, Tuan fixing the garden, Lan smiling with neighbors. She turned the pages slowly, stopping at one with all of them together. In that moment, she closed the book and looked around. Her heart was full, not with things, not even forgiveness, but with peace. Later that night, as the moon rose over Dong Hoa Street, Lan sat by the window with Ben asleep on her lap. She hummed an old lullaby, the same one she used to sing to Tuan when he was small, sick, afraid. Tuan stood by the doorway, watching, and he thought maybe this is what healing really is. Not forgetting the pain, but making space for it to live beside love. Because in the end, the most radical act in a world of noise is to love quietly, and to come home, even if it takes a lifetime. The end.